Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 2025 Winter Wheat Variety Trials in Genesee. Of course, we're behind the processing seed plant. It's May 2nd. We're just about wrapped up with spring seed season. I think we're down to 5 or 6 guys putting in the last fields around Genesee. So we haven't had a lot of rain in the past month. It's been a really good thing getting the crop in, but I hope the skies open up and we get a lot of rain coming. I think we're in a lot better shape than 2021 for winter moisture. That year, for the entire crop year, we had 13 and a half inches at this site. So far, we're sitting at about 15 and a half inches. So we're already about 2 inches ahead where we were in that year. Uh, the future June, July forecast is kind of all over the board. Uh, we could get a reprieve and actually have a little cooler June, or we could have a hotter, drier summer. So time will tell. Real quick, this variety trial, Shannon and I seeded it on September 18th. We actually had fairly good moisture out here. We'd had about 3/4 of an inch of rain that first week of September. Interesting to note here, though, was if we were able to hit moisture when we seeded the crop, that wheat was out of the ground in about 10 days. Some places out here, we didn't quite hit moisture. That wheat didn't emerge for about 10 days later. So got this trial in early, but anything that came up right away, you can see has quite the advantage over anything that might have came up about a week later. As you move farther west in the trial, you'll see a little more high-low out here, and that's really that not necessarily seed date, but if we're able to hit moisture when we seeded it. We have 26 varieties up front here, or on the eastern part of this trial, that are actually commercially available varieties. To my left right here is Camiac by itself. Camiac really quick to break dormancy in the spring. It's not photo period sensitive, so we if we have the grow or the heat units or growing degree days, say in March or even February, this variety is going to get going. Right next to it, we actually have Shine. You can see right now they're about exactly the same height. 2 weeks ago, though, Camiac had about a 4 inch height advantage over Shine. In the middle of the trial, I believe there's 18 or 19 herbicide tolerant varieties, mostly clear fields, but I think we're up to 8 coaxium varieties that we're testing here. Following that, we have about 24 experimentals. So that's really where we want to take a look at them at least 2, 3 years, get that really good look. If one or two or three are going to make a variety, or if they're going to get released, is that something that those varieties do well here? At the very end of the trial, we had room for about 30 uh, strips of Rydrick. That's the new soft white winter wheat WSU released last fall. We are going to have some seed of that available this fall for you guys. Its claim to fame, it's metribuzin tolerant. In fact, I came out here in mid-March. The front range got 4 ounces of metribuzin. The back range, range 300, got 8 ounces of metribuzin. And then the middle range got 12 ounces of metribuzin. Every day I'm back here, never did see a plant response with even that 12 ounces of metribuzin. That variety really handled that. We didn't have a lot of ryegrass up here, even though there's a lot of ryegrass in that end of the trial. But, Anthemflex or Zidua, I think for most guys last fall, worked really good. We didn't seem to have a lot of escapes this spring. But we really wanted to see that crop response. We're going to harvest those ranges. We'll take the average of each range and see if there's a yield, you know, if those different rates of metribuzin impacted yield. What we also did down there, Shannon can talk about a little if he wants to, but that's where we did our nutrition part on that Rydrick. So looking at different amino acids, micros at that herbicide timing. Um, in the back over here, we've got a big block of canola. I'm going to that was Shannon's trial last year. It was pretty cool. I think that was our mothership trial last year. Uh, we were pretty excited about it. We were looking at both varieties and then kind of larger scale fungicide and some nutrition.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. And for those that came to our field day last year, you were probably able to come out and see that. Like Kyle said, it was kind of our pride and joy of foliar trials. It was 9 ranges deep, and we had 18 different varieties in there. We looked at a lot of different fungicides and timings, nutritional packages, foliar fertilizer packages, plant growth regulators. So we had a lot of data come out of that trial. Again, we've mentioned this before, but if you haven't had a compendium, we do publish all of our data in the compendiums at the end of the year. Make sure you can get a hold of one of these. We hope there's a lot of valuable data for you guys. But yeah, so last year that was our winter wheat trial. This year it's seeded to canola. We learned a lot from that. We had 18 different varieties. We did have stripe rust show up in the trial pretty heavily. The first range was actually an untreated check. And out of 18 commercially available varieties, only 8 varieties in that trial broke to stripe rust without a fungicide. So it really just shows the disease resistance we have on a lot of those varieties. Yeah, so on the same site this year, we have canola. It's laid out the same. There's 9 different ranges and 18 varieties. We're going to look at different fungicides. We're going to look at vine and veg again, different micro packages. And so we were excited to gather some data from that again. Last year, though, learning a lot from that trial on winter wheat. Some of the big takeaways was their first range was an untreated check. The second range was a herbicide or a fungicide at herbicide timing only. And then the third range was a fungicide at herbicide and flag leaf timing. So 2 applications. Really, it came down to the early shorter varieties that had good disease ratings like Shine and Kamiak. Really, everything benefited from that early herbicide timing fungicide, but then those earlier varieties that are short and quick to mature and beat the heat, that second application of fungicide at flag leaf timing really didn't show much for dividends. And we've seen this in the past that sometimes with those earlier varieties, you make that application at flag leaf timing, it's starting to get hot, that plant's maturing quick, and it grows all this tillage and vegetation, but can't support those many tillers. And that's what we've seen repeatedly is those early shorter varieties really pay big dividends having that fungicide or herbicide timing, but that additional application sometimes doesn't pay. Now, the more susceptible varieties like Bounty, varieties like that are taller, later, more susceptible to stripe rust, those are where we saw those varieties really benefit from that fungicide at flag leaf timing. So it's really about knowing your variety, the weather conditions. Again, so far this spring, we're a little bit warmer and drier. We're really hoping for rain, but if it stays like this, most varieties will probably just benefit from that herbicide timing fungicide. So that's what we're going to continue looking at. Last year, too, I think one of the big things that popped out, almost as important as what fungicide you choose, I think what adjuvant you use in that also shows big dividends. We looked at a few different adjuvants, but the one that stuck out the most was Winfield's Interlock. This is a drift agent, a canopy penetrant, and a deposition aid. And we tested multiple trials, and across all winter wheat trials, we averaged 6 bushels per acre increase with the Interlock versus a standard NIS or deposition aid. And it just goes to show that more of that fungicide made it to the plant. What I've noticed with Interlock is it just makes more consistent droplets. You don't have as many of those small 50 micron droplets that just evaporate or drift, and you don't have as many of those large 450 micron droplets. So it makes a more uniform, more consistent droplet pattern, and more of that fungicide makes it to the plant and it is able to be taken up by the plant. And I think that's the effect we saw, is that plant health effect taking up more of that fungicide.
So anyway, we worked with Alba for a long time with Chad and Ed. In fact, I think Chad and we've been working together for almost 30 years. So last 6, 7 years, we've looked at a lot of my crop trials. If you get our compendiums, I think for at least the last 6 years, we've had 1 or 2 or 3 trials with my crop. Shannon mentioned the strip trial last year. We really want to see what varieties respond the best. Once again, it comes back to that ROI to you guys. If you have a variety like Shine that we know is pretty much bulletproof for stripe rust, especially on a year like this, are we going to pick up a slight bump in yield, just plant health? Or, as Shannon mentioned later on, that herbicide or that flag leaf application, we actually saw yield drag. So I think it really depends on the year. If we have a 2020, 22, where we're cutting 10, 20% above average yields, we're getting a lot of rain, cooler summer. That's where, maybe that second treatment is so critical. or we have a year like maybe this year shaping up to be, or 2021, where we're warmer, drier, we're actually seeing pretty big yield hits. If we can maybe, I think this year we're going to see shorter wheat. All these varieties that we've raised since the mid 60s have that semi-dwarf gene, but it really depends on the environment if that gene really gets expressed. Last year in that trial, I think the trial mean was right around 150 bushel. And Shannon, we had wheat out there that was both of us are pretty tall guys, and I think my wife Shelly, always mention her. When she walked out in there, all you could see was the top of her head. So some of that wheat got really tall. It was a real challenge getting that canola crop established. I think we're going to have a really cool trial there, looking at different varieties and how those varieties react differently to maybe a fungicide or some plant nutrition. Um, Jumping back into my crop, it's micronized as oxystrobin and a propiconazole. It's kind of like quilt. Other than the micron size is very small. Shannon mentioned using interlock, getting more of that fungicide into the plant. With my crop, you just get instead of maybe 40% uptake with, say, a propiconazole, they're seeing maybe 60 to 70% uptake where it's micronized or really small molecular size. Uh, for the money, I think it's probably well worth it. There's some dynamite top end fungicides on the market, Nexacor, Trivapro, all of those are really good. You just, they're you pay for what you get for though, and I think that's where maybe like a microp, maybe in between that generic Propy or Zoxystar and say that Nexacor. So, but anyway, our hard red winter wheat variety trial is across the creek. We didn't have room to put them in here, so we really wanted to get rydrick down here on the end where we had some ryegrass. So we have about 20 hard red uh, varieties across the creek. On the end of that, we actually have a big block of Bounty. Shannon mentioned Bounty in our script trial last year. I think it's rated about a 5 out of 10 for stripe rust. It has pretty good H tap, but it's at that pretty hotter temperature before that kicks in. So across the creek, I think Shannon later today, if this wind dies down, it's blowing about 10 to 15 right now. He's going to go down there and make those herbicide timing applications on that Bounty.
Yeah, so it's May 2nd, and as we start wrapping up herbicide timing applications for our wheat, everything's growing quick. We really hope that this helps you guys make decisions for that flag leaf timing. Again, I think it's all about knowing your variety. Depending on weather patterns, if we start getting rain or if it stays dry, that's going to influence that. It's all about ROI, and that's what we try to focus on. And so if it stays dry like this, similar to last year, I think we could try to limit that flag leaf application and talk to your local field guy, depending on what varieties you have, or reference the compendium. But I think that's going to be things that really help save us some money in the long run, maybe save an airplane trip at flag leaf timing. That's really what we want to focus on. Being cautious of our inputs, but also not limiting our yield potential. And so that's what we try to focus on. I am going to this afternoon go make the herbicide timing fungicide applications. I'm applying a lot of our most commercially available fungicides. I'm applying Nexacor, Approach, just a generic Propy, Mycrop. I think in the past of what we've seen, and Kyle's talked about Mycrop quite a bit, I think that's my choice because you get the propiconazole, which really helps with the disease, but then you get the azoxystrobin, which really helps you on the plant health effect. And I think in years like this, where it's hot and dry, and there's maybe not as much disease, you still get a really good boost in plant health. And I think we've seen that reflect in yields in the past. Nexacor, we've always seen really good responses from. It's been a really good input. I think this year with $6 wheat and trying to be cautious of our inputs, half priced Mycrop versus a few dollar or $2 propiconazole. I think there's a lot of options, but making sure we're cautious of those inputs. And I think that's why we've worked so much with Mycrop, is because you get that propiconazole and also that azoxystrobin, and it's an affordable treatment. So we're excited to see what we learned from the fungicides trials this year. We're excited to bring it to you guys and hope that we can help you guys bring positive ROIs to your farm.
Well, anyway, we've hopefully these little short videos. This is something I've thought about for probably the last 10 years. I'm getting toward the tail end of my career, and technology is not probably my forefront. Um, I like to dig in the dirt, but sharing this information to you guys. So pretty excited with Shannon. He's really good with the drone. Uh, we have our IT guy Tim behind the scenes. He's the guy that's really kind of put our dual grower meetings together. So big shout out to him. We'll see if these videos are a hit. We have no idea. But real quick, just what you're seeing here in Genesee. Uh, Overall, I think there's about 84 winter wheat varieties that we're looking at. We're doing this here. We have a trial in Colfax on Millers. That's on top of a hill. We actually had a trial there 3 years ago. Really gives a good indication how those varieties are going to react on that higher ground or heavier clay soils. Really excited. We have this exact same trial in Potlatch just west of Princeton on Jacob Bowles ground. It was actually, I think it was a barley hay crop last year that he took off, and then we see it at a trial there. I've been to it a couple times already this spring. That trial looks dynamite. So really get a feel for how those varieties maybe handle those colder, wetter, lower pH soils. And then of course we have our fourth trial is up at Oaksdale. That year or this year, it's on Matt Brown's ground, just right on the edge of town. Oaksdale kind of had that 1996 flood that went through there. And unfortunately, the very first range of that trial got washed out. But I still think we'll get pretty good data. It'll be worth looking at our Northern Field Day in the end of June. But other than that, we have a lot of trials, a lot of data. Hope to bring to you guys this winter. Once again, it's about bringing the best ROI to you guys. I really only like to look at things that are going to give you probably at least a 4 to 1. So if you spend $1, hopefully you get $4 back in yield or maybe quality as well. Last, right next to us here, this is actually a seed treat trial on winter wheat. The variety is Encore. One thing when we see really good soil conditions, at least in the fall, that's really where your seed treats probably aren't going to have much impact on stand or correlating to yield. What we did there, that was actually Ryan's spring wheat last year. I really wanted that kind of wetter, more straw environment. We seeded that trial, I believe it was the end of October. Encore, really good variety. I think for a 2 gene clear field, it's going to gain a lot of traction. Um, and you could tell it's once again about seeding day, or if you can, if we have fall moisture, seed early, take advantage of that. It's finally starting to catch up, but that crop's been lagging about 3 weeks all year. So hopefully in that tougher environment, we'll see some of these seed treats really stick out. Once again, we want to bring the best genetics to you guys and really with the best seed care package that we can get on your seed for you. So hopefully you guys are done wrapping up spring work. We just wanted to give a little recap what's going on in our trials, what we're working on. Shannon, I think you sprayed 24 acres last year with that little 4-foot sprayer. It's pretty cool though. I think it's very consistent. We see pretty tight CVs in our trials when we cut them. And I don't know how many acres you're going to spray this year, but maybe a couple more than last year even. So thank you, and hope everyone has a great summer.